Okay. All righty. We are here. So, third interview of the day. Today's been a busy, busy day. And last, but absolutely, certainly not least, is my friend, Terri Moon. Welcome, Terri.
Thank you, Michelle. Happy to be here with you.
So Terri and I met in a couple of different networking circles in our community. And we felt an instant connection, and we've done some deep sacred work together in women's circle spaces. And one of the reasons I really want Terri to speak her story is because I feel like so many people will be able to tap into different aspects of themselves through hearing Terri's journey, and how no matter what your experience has been, there is light, there is joy, there is the juicy work that we get to do in the world. And it's not that there isn't struggle, but it's the tools of coming back again and again to ourselves and sharing our stories with each other and opening up our hearts. Like Terri has the juiciest, sweetest heart. And I love those moments I've had with her where she's just really taken that breath and just opened up herself to her own vulnerability. And it's just been beautiful to witness. And I'm so grateful for our trust together and our ability to drop in that deeply with each other. It's been a real blessing in my life. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm going to read Terri's bio real quick, and then we're going to leap and see what happens. So Terri Moon, MS, has taught heart-based, nonviolent communication for 15 years and on 4 continents. She offers meditation, coaching, and communication skills training, including leading WomanSpeak Circles to empower and inspire healing, satisfaction, fulfillment, and joy in our bodies, our relationships, our businesses, and in the world. She empowers women's voices and family healing to restore heart-based communication and connection, one family or business at a time. I love it. Yay!
Yay!
So I'm actually gonna start with asking you to check in and just feel into, where do you want to start on this journey of conversation about women and power?
Well, first of all, I feel the tears welling as you're sharing these things about me, and remembering some of the places that we've been to together. It touches my heart. And one of the things that came up as you were talking about those places we've been together is how I can just open to that vulnerability. And that's a commitment that I made to myself and to the world, and to all my relationships, is that I think vulnerability has a bad rap. It in our culture, it's like something to be avoided, or you don't want to show, you want to keep your mask on, you don't want to be vulnerable. And yet for me, I decided years ago that I want to open to that vulnerability each and every opportunity that I have to, because that's where the juiciness of life lives.
Yeah.
It's so satisfying and fulfilling to live from that place of like, no, I'm just going to rip that kimono open, and just be sharing all of who I am, and not in situations where it's not safe, and and not in ways that are going to put me at risk of of being injured or something like that. I've been through that, but I want to be in a place where I'm making a conscious choice to open and choose that rather than to try to hide from it or try to
Yeah.
run away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And you bring up such an important point that I think many of us who work with speakers, this is like the place where we tease out the story, right? Is there are some stories that we're not ready to tell. We're not on the other side of it yet, or we're still mired in the victim's story around it, or we're still too sensitive to the overwhelm of our emotions. And knowing which story to share, and whether it's a safe environment, whether this story can actually be like, do the people in the room have the capacity to hold this story that I'm about to tell? Is it in service? Like, depending on what kind of group we're in, like if I'm in a personal group for myself, then I'm, the space is designed to be holding my story, right? But if I'm sharing from a stage, like not everybody in that audience is ready or asked for or signed up to hear maybe some of the deeper moments of my story, right? So knowing, all of those little nuances. Is it safe? Is this the right audience for this particular story? Am I ready to share this story? Is there someone in the audience that could attack? And if so, am I prepared, to manage that? Is this enough? Am I through this story enough to manage if someone throws something at me that I'm not going to get rocked off my socks, that I'm going to be able to stay connected and grounded?
I hear you speaking to a couple of things. One, like discernment, can I trust myself to know when it's safe to be vulnerable and when it's not?
Yeah.
And self-trust is the other thing. It's really, am I connected with myself? Am I able to hear and listen and honor what my body's telling me, to be able to discern? Because that's where the wisdom, that's where the knowledge and the discernment comes from, right? Is that wisdom and that intelligence in our bodies. And so if we're in tune with that and we can listen in there, then we can discern whether or not the situation is safe, and whether, but that commitment to be vulnerable in all those situations, it's, to me, it's like, it's the edge, it's the cutting edge where growth is. That's where growth happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, because when it is a conscious decision, then we are empowered. We're not just by the nature of the fact that I am choosing this, and I'm making a conscious decision to open my heart, is an empowering place to be. And like you said, with vulnerability getting a bad rap, it's like we have this association with vulnerability that it means you're like, you've got a big target on your forehead or a big target on your heart. And that's exact opposite. The more open and connected we are to our own story, the more we connect to others, because they're seeing past all of the bullshit, the veneers, the whatevers, and feeling us on such a deep level. And that's where the magic happens between the listener and the messenger. So deeply important.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you talking about that, the connection that happens, when we can be with ourselves and stay present and really just listen, and instead of trying to run away from or hide, right, from whatever it is. It makes me think about that Brene Brown TED Talk, where she talks about we're the most drinkingest, druggingest, workingest, that we have all these isms of gambling and addictions, where we're constantly trying to numb ourselves out, which is disconnecting us from our own power source, right? And I hear you speaking to choice, right? And that choice is where our power is. Right?
Absolutely.
And I think about Lucy Liu's one of the trainers in NVC world, and she's written a couple of different books, but she's worked a lot with the prisoners in different prison systems. And she talks about, creating the space between the fist and the face, that's where
I love that.
is, right? You can choose right in that moment before the fist hits the face. And that critical choice point is where the power lies, right? if we go ahead and we don't have any control over it, then we don't have power, right? But as soon as we are become aware of that choice, oh, I could choose to go further or I could choose to pull back, then that's where our power comes from, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that it reminds me of an exercise I used to do with teenagers to explore passive versus aggressive and then the assertive middle. And it was just a game where you had to put your hands up and try to push the other person over. Right. And I would use that as like, you know, they would start pushing and I just give up, you know, and I'm like, okay, this is clearly passive, right? Like I'm just not even engaging at all. And then we would play and I'd like push, you know, and I'd fall over, you know, and I'd say, okay, I can get myself in trouble if I'm pushing too hard, you know, and you're like, what? And then I play with them and they never were able to win because I was able to really discern like, now's the time to push, you know, but I would push and then step back and witness, right? And be present to what was happening. Or I would see that they were leaning too close and I would pull back, but I wouldn't disengage. Like I would stay present, right? And use that as a tactic. And they loved playing that game with me because they could never, ever win, but they got this very visceral experience of like assertive means you're in it. Like you're in it. You're not walking away. You're also not like, you know, pushing too hard. You're just feeling it out. What do I need to do here? What do I need to, you know, I loved it.
Yeah. And I'm surprised that they enjoyed it, even if they were losing.
They did. Because they just knew they would be the one to win, and they never did. I usually stopped it before they could, you know. So
is that because your reflexes are
treachery, right? I had my own tactics.
Is that because you have fast reflexes, Michelle?
No, I think it's just because I pay attention.
Oh,
I'm reading the subtle little cues, seeing them gear up for the big push, and then being like, "Go for it," you know, just a little. Now, of course, if I did that with somebody my own age, I'd probably lose my ass. But because these were young folks who were still learning about their own discernment, right, and their own ability to pay attention, I think that's why I won.
Interesting.
Yeah. So one of my favorite questions to ask is, you know, I know that those of us who are in the field of service, we have a story behind why we do what we do. This is our work is often our greatest wounding, the lesson we are seeking to master in this life in some way, shape, or form. So I would love to hear your journey, your story to coming to the work that you do and how that relates to your sense of power.
Yeah, an interesting question and long answer probably.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. Because it's not like this, right? That's the myth.
That's right.
Once I know what to do, it's like wham bam. No, it doesn't work that way. It's messy.
Right. So I know I'm the oldest of 4 girls, and we were all born within 4.5 years to the very day.
Oh, wow.
Except I was born a month late. So my feet on my birth certificate are like a month-old baby, right? Because I was a month late from the due date. Oh, it's something freezing?
Yep. So you were born
a month late.
Ah, gotcha.
And I'm wondering if I need to close something down here. I'm going to just do that and see if that helps. Okay. And all 3 of my sisters were born a month early.
Interesting.
And their feet were little preemies, right? Premature babies. And so there was this huge discrepancy, even though we had like 1 year between us. It was stair steps, but my stair step was much bigger than theirs. And so I ended up taking on a lot of responsibility. And I mean, I think the oldest children, that's pretty common and yet because of the size difference, it was even more obvious, I think, in my family. And yeah, so I became like this really large kid that took on all this extra responsibility, started babysitting for kids in the neighborhood. You know, part of the reason why my sisters were all born a month early is because my parents would have domestic violence
Mm.
experiences, and my mother would end up in labor a
Oh,
month
wow.
early. So there was this, it was a war between
Yeah.
my parents, really. And it was a war between men and women, but it was in mom and dad, but it was also a kind of a war between engineer and artist.
Mm.
So that was a big piece of what was happening for me too. And I think that becoming a mediator and a nonviolent communication trainer and a coach all comes from that background, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah. Natural mediator, right? Just kind of jumping right into what was already happening.
and yet when I was a child, I didn't jump right in.
Yeah.
I cowered in the corner, right, with a knot in my belly,
Yeah.
fear,
Mhm.
and also my mother would leave my father. Like she left, I think, 8 different times when I was growing up, and started a divorce, and every time she'd end up going back to my dad.
Mm.
And her story was that she was um, afraid that with a high school education she couldn't support 4 girls on her own, and so she would go back to financial security.
Right.
And so she always told me, make sure and get your education, because that's your freedom. That's your choice. So that's a big
Mm.
part of why I do what I do, I think. And you talked about the WomenSpeak Circles too, that I'm really excited about the possibility of like supporting women in speaking their voice from their heart in a way that they have more impact
Mhm.
on our whole culture and our whole society, right? Because I see that the world that men and women live in is very different. It's the patriarchy versus the matriarchy.
Right.
And the culture that we're living in right now, with the pandemic and with the climate crisis and so much else that's going on, the race riots, and you know it's all, we really are in a place where something's got to change, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that women's voices, like the Dalai Lama said,
Yep.
right? The Western woman will save the world. And
Yes.
I think that that's part of what we're stepping up to right
Yeah.
now, is that we're finding a way to do that.
Yeah.
And I feel really excited about what might come out of that, because what I know is that the world that women will create will be very different than the world that men have created.
I agree. I think the other thing that's coming up for me as you're speaking is that one of the barriers that we have as women to standing up and speaking our truth is also the sisterhood wound that has been unhealed for many of us. And so our paradigm, the feminine paradigm, is that we come together, right? We collaborate, we are in sisterhood, we are holding each other uh, safely to be able to speak our truth and push those edges of what we think is comfortable, or to let us know that we're okay and we're safe. But we can't do that until we've healed some of the sisterhood wounds that are still rampant. The comparisonitis, the tearing each other down, the competition, all of these things that pull us, that are designed to keep us from coming together. They're designed to keep us from saying, not listening to that. We're bringing our sisters together. We're standing up together and we're saying this shit is not okay. No more. We're done.
That's right. Yeah. And that's another thing that I'm just love about Women Speak, is that when a woman gets on the stage to speak her talk, 3 minute, 5 minute talk, or 12-minute talk, or whatever she's doing, she gets, not just, she gets like, wow, just for standing up on the stage,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all the women in the crowd are doing that for her before she ever opens her mouth,
I
just
love it.
in total celebration of
Yeah.
the fact that she's willing to speak her truth. Because
Yeah.
we all have that burned at the stake
We
witch
do.
stuff in the past,
Witch
right?
wound. It's a real thing. It's a real thing.
That's right. Speaking our truth can be very, very terrifying, right?
Yeah.
which is why we have the support system that we need to be able to do that, right? Because we really do need it, because we really do have this history, and it's really living in our bodies still. I know it is in mine. I've worked with a lot of clients too.
Yeah.
And so, and after she speaks, she gets a standing ovation, whether we agree with her or not, right? Even if we don't agree, we are whooping and hollering and yelling and clapping and screaming and jumping up and down for each other. And it's healing that wound at the cellular level, in our nervous systems, as well as in our community. And you know, the part of our nervous systems, like you were talking about the women, how our tendency when we're stressed is to come together. That's the bonding, the oxytocin, it's the tend and befriend, right? Whereas men, it's the other way around, where it's like they go to their cave, right? They go to be alone and be away from everybody else. And so, and this is a time when we're going to have to come together on the planet to heal all the things that are going on, right? Because it's just bigger than anything we've ever experienced. I mean, there's never been a history before, right, where every single person on the planet, no matter what country you were living in, was experiencing the same thing, more or less, for 6 months. No, that hasn't happened. So, but I think it's bringing us together as a humanity. And I think the same thing is true of like the climate crisis that's going on, you know, and solving that issue is going to take us coming together rather than fragmenting off, right? And I love this. Yeah, healing the sister wound is a really important piece of both staying in our nervous systems and having that oxytocin, that feel good energy, and that bonding and that supporting each other, and being able to live in a way that we can speak our truth, and it is safe to do that. And what's interesting is Casey has Casey Baker, who started WomenSpeak, has totally helped me to reframe that anxiety that you feel when you step on the stage, or the anxiety you feel when you're gonna speak your truth, whether it's at the dinner party at Thanksgiving with, you know, the family that are on different sides of the political divide, or whether it's with your intimate partner when something is not going right, or when you're up on stage marketing your business, or whatever it is, right? To be able to speak that truth and do it in a way that's impactful, and translate that anxiety or that fear that comes up into realizing, hey, that's my power. That anxiety, that fear,
I need that energy.
It's my power. And I don't want to step away from that. And I don't want to hide it. So we learn in the WomenSpeak program to dance with it, right? We learn tips and tricks to kind of stay with it, but diffuse it so that we can be with it and move through it, and match it with whatever comes at us from outside of us. So I don't know, I feel very excited about what it makes possible that wasn't possible before. I noticed after just doing a couple of classes, I recorded a video about it yesterday as part of my completion of my training program, which is, you know, I for years have sat in the back of the room and not shared what I wanted to speak, just because of that fear, anxiety, my power. I didn't want to show my power. It was scary to do that. And now, I mean, after just like 1 or 2 classes with her, I noticed that I went to this training. It was a day-long training, and I ended up speaking on the microphone 4 times that day. I would stay in the back corner, and I would have to go to the microphone in the front other corner. And I was fine with being seen by all those people and speaking my truth on the microphone, even though, you know, I've always been scared of microphones. Suddenly, just knowing that it was my power, that and reinterpreting in that different way made all the difference for me to be able to actually speak up in a way that I was uncomfortable doing.
Well, and that the culture supports it, because I think that's the other piece is like, you know, when it feels like you're trying to reinvent the wheel, there's no real support, you know, so you don't know how people are going to take it. You don't necessarily have anything to fall back on other than your own conviction, you know. But when there is a culture around you that is supporting you taking that risk and saying, we can handle it, we can handle you showing up as your most powerful, badass, shiny self. Please, come on, do it, you know.
We're celebrating you.
Exactly. It's like, oh, you know, I did a workshop a little while back, and I had a woman who, she's like, I did my first like presentation in front of my group, and she said, I did it imperfectly, but I've got to tell you, I was so on fire and so willing to just be myself and like get big and bold and kind of intense when I talked about certain things, and then come back down into kind of the softer presence. And it was because she had permission. Like we had just said, go for it. Like just play with all of the edges. We're going to hold it all for you. And that gave her the confidence to be able to go, well, shoot, if I can really embody that and own that, then I can do that in other spaces too. It's just, it's so rich. It's so rich. And we need it. We need the support. We need as many places as possible to use our voices.
That's right.
And share our stories, share our messages.
I could not agree more. Yes. And it feels like it's happening, you know, like there's networking groups of women that I'm involved with, that, you know, the polka dot group we did, and so many other groups of women supporting each other and coming together that way. It's not like it was when I was growing up, where there was, I remember coming home as a teenager and saying, you know, I had won an award for not missing any days of school. And my sisters were like, you just are getting too big for your britches, you know, or who do you think you are? You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
No, those days are gone. The long.
Yeah. I remember hiding A's on my paper, not letting anybody know that I was a smart girl, you know, wanting to be funny or be the storyteller as a way to deflect from anybody knowing that I, you know, was smart, that I could, you know, and all of the different little ways that I would hide these shiny parts of me, you know, it's just, it's so, it's tough. It's tough to be a girl and
your light in the world, right?
Yeah. And especially when it's burning to come out.
Yeah, right. And are you feeling like it is these days to shine your light in the world? It's okay or not?
Me at this point? Oh, hell yes.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm at that stage in my life. I think it's a combination of the stage of my life, right? Like hitting, you know, approaching 50 and, you know, menopause and, you know, all of those places. I think a lot of it is the inner work that I've done. And what I love about the kind of work that we do is like, we are constantly growing as we do our work. So as I watch a woman that I have supported break through, a piece of me breaks through that I didn't even know needed to break through, you know? And so it's like, we're such beautiful mirrors for each other in the work that we do. And so I know that as I've had women stand up and like claim what they desire, whatever, you've seen that exercise where it's like, I deserve this, you know, women cry, women can't even say it. You know, there's like so much shit that comes up for us when we just stand in our own desire. And the fact that we deserve something or we're worthy of something, you know. So every time that I do that, it's funny because like when I have to go into the center, I still get, but it's the energy you're talking about, right? The anxiety energy where it's like, I get super nervous. I'm like, oh, you know, but I also know I've had that reframe myself of like, this is my power building. This is my power building so that when I claim this, I am claiming it all the fucking way from my toes to the tips of my hair. Right. And that means something, and that will resonate for someone. It will be in service to someone and in service to myself. Yeah. So
and
huge.
Funny you mentioned that. I remember doing that circle once. Yeah. And just like shouting it out. Yeah. Our biggest fears, or what was not allowed to be said, right? What we didn't have permission to be, right?
Yes.
But now it's about giving ourselves that permission.
Exactly. Yeah.
We don't do it right at our age.
We don't have to wait anymore. No more waiting.
Right.
We get the, what is it? The not quite the senior discount, but we get the, like we get to go to the front of the line.
That's right. That's right. We don't have time to wait anymore.
Right?
Time
No way.
to-
No way. Oh my goodness. I love it.
Funny.
So, tell me a little bit about, when I took notes on our first conversation, one of the things that you said that you felt really strongly was when you broke through this belief that power meant power over versus power that is coming from within and coming from inside. So can you share a little bit about that piece of your journey? Like where did that realization happen, or how did you come to that awareness of like, hold on a second, that's not actually what that means for
Yeah.
me?
In nonviolent communication, learning from Marshall Rosenberg, which I like to call heart-based communication, we have a concept of power over versus power with.
Mm-hmm.
And power over is like your mom saying to you, you do this or I'll give you a reason to cry,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You're going to get punished basically if you don't do it my way or in my timing. There's no room for autonomy or anything like that in that.
Yeah.
So there's like an order or a command or a demand from someone who has more power or authority over us usually.
Right. Right.
And versus in a power with situation, I connect with you at the heart. And because I'm connected with you, you want me to have what I need, right?
Yeah.
And because I'm connected with you, I want you to have what you need. And so we do a dance of how can we get both of our needs met at the same time. And that the power with is an influence or it comes actually from me choosing that vulnerability, choosing to share with you what's happening inside of myself. So for instance, if you were to say, let's go get some food at a restaurant, okay, and I say I want to go to Chinese but you want to go to Italian, it comes from me sharing. I've been gluten-free for like 30 years, Michelle. Italian restaurants are so painful for me because when I go there, I smell that fresh baked bread with all that gluten in it. And it's really hard to resist. But if I go there, then I'm going to suffer for a few days after that. And when you hear that part, then you would rather go someplace
Exactly.
Italian, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I have power with you in the sense that suddenly you don't want to go to Italian anymore.
Right.
Suddenly you are willing to come to Chinese, or we both decide we're going to go get Thai food instead, right? I don't know. But not being attached to the results, that's a whole different thing. But
Right.
power with is by sharing what's going on with me, what I'm feeling and what I'm needing with you, that somehow shifts you. And that shift is the power with.
Yeah.
I don't have to order you or say, no, we're not going for Italian.
Yeah.
I can just tell you why that wouldn't work for me. And because we're connected, you say, oh, I don't want to do that if it's not going to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful. I've seen that work with my own kids, when everybody's fighting over, where we're going to go eat, and, and there's that, well, so and so gets to choose, so that's just how it's going to be. Or there's, hey, let's take a look at our options. Let's, and I have to share that the gluten, like, that's a place I don't really have any options. I can eat a salad. Like, that's my only real option. I would love to have some more options. And, we've all kind of enjoyed this place. What do you think about that? So yeah, it just becomes a collaborative process, and the kids don't feel shut down because they're being told that their want is not okay. They're
Right.
able
Or
to
it
go
doesn't
into
matter,
that.
right?
Yeah, exactly. They're able to go into that heart space and go, oh, that's right. She can't eat that stuff. So, what's another alternative, and I can always throw in the, hey, when I'm gone on one of my things, you guys can all go out and glutenize yourselves to To your heart's content.
The pizza, right? And the breadsticks.
Exactly.
People eat breadsticks and pizza at the same meal, right?
I know. I know. I know.
And then
I'm right there with you.
The salad, right?
Yes.
Oh my.
So let's see. So tell me, you mentioned earlier in the conversation this idea of like learning discernment, right? Like, so as a woman who was in an environment where you were in the corner and you were afraid, and I would imagine there are times when you had a feeling or sensation that you were told was wrong or inaccurate, or, you know, not the time and place, you know, be quiet. How did you build the muscle of discernment and self-trust?
Wow. I like the question. Have to think about that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it came from my training in nonviolent communication, where I stopped caring about what other people thought so much. And I started, in other words, I stopped looking outwards for answers. I started looking inwards for answers. And I started putting names to my own feelings and putting names to my own needs, which is what the whole process of nonviolent communication, and seeing how the feeling that I'm having in my body is connected to this need or value that's either being met or not met.
Right.
Joy is connected to the fact that I was just able to spend time with a friend, right?
Yeah.
That disappointment has to do with the fact that I was really wanting to have community, or whatever the need isn't being met. Right. So those, getting clear on that, like by listening to the feelings, and that is a way to navigate through the world. I actually think that it is our built-in GPS system as human beings.
Yes.
And that we are not taught that. We are not taught. It's like emotional intelligence. We don't know it, right? We're not taught this stuff. I got a master's degree. Marshall Rosenberg, who founded Nonviolent Communication, got a PhD, and neither one of us were ever taught what we were feeling in our schools.
Not only are we not taught, we are given the message that it's bad and wrong, and that your feeling may make somebody else uncomfortable, therefore don't have it. Stuff it down, smile, put on a happy face. Like, we not only don't teach it, we do damage to that GPS system, right? Because we tell people that they shouldn't be having it in the first place.
Right.
How fucked up is that?
Totally. Yeah. And for me, I'm thinking back to one of my first jobs in the corporate world, right? It was my second job in the corporate world, where I was like in San Francisco in the financial district on the 7th floor, with my own department, and shopping for my Jones of New York suits on my lunch break. I thought I was just hot stuff. I was 27. Yeah. And because I was still living this way, where I was concerned about other people and putting on that face, and didn't want anybody to know that I felt like an imposter at some level, right? That fraud syndrome or whatever, that I didn't really think I knew what I was doing, even though my master's degree, I had been taught all this, right?
Yeah.
I was hiding out. And what did it get me? Ulcerative colitis. My lower back wouldn't sit at a desk anymore. My vision, which was farsighted, when I would get up from the little desk and all the data that I was analyzing and look down at the end of the hallway, it was one big blur. Now I was 27. And that's what I got from not honoring or listening to my body and being focused outside, because I didn't have that vocabulary. I didn't have that training of what I'm feeling and how that connects to what I need in order to be able to get my needs met. I was still walking around. Man, I waited on tables and worked my way through college and graduate school, And I was good at it, and I would get great money because I had this smile, right? And I could smile even though they were saying, "Where's my coffee? Where's my French fries? And you forgot this." And I could just keep smiling, right? And that I don't have that ability to do that anymore because I'm so connected with my feelings, right? I can't like push that part of me down anymore because I know the value of it, right? I know the value of being navigating from the inside out rather than from what other people think of me. And I honestly, I think that I took that job in the corporate world because I thought my father might finally be proud of me, right? You know, it was not a fit for me.
Yeah.
My body did not want to be under those fluorescent lights.
Yeah.
It did not want to be sitting at a desk all day long. And so it really was a long process of learning and listening. And another piece of my story is, I ended up getting married 8 days after I graduated from high school to a man I had been going steady with since I was 15 years old.
Wow.
A rock and roll musician with hair down to his waist. Not what my parents had in mind for me at all. And I
Come on, rebel.
and and I ended up repeating the pattern with my mom and dad, with my ex-husband, right? And it was because I had a bunch of shoulds in my head of what society expected of me, what I was supposed to be doing. I think even the day before or the day of the wedding, there was a little niggling inside of me, even at 18. This is not the right thing to do here, but I couldn't call off the wedding because I had already mailed the invitations and people might show up and be disappointed. I was more concerned about them being disappointed that the wedding would be canceled at the last minute than I was about me getting stuck in a marriage that wasn't going to work for me.
Oh my goodness.
The rest of my life. Honestly, that's really true. And so
yeah. I can so relate because I had a very similar, mine was my wedding night. And the narrative that was going through my head is like, I have to try, because the scariest thing for me to think of was calling all of those people and sending their gifts back and saying that they showed up for no reason.
Right. Yeah. To be externally focused like that, it will lead to a lot of misery.
20 years.
Yeah. My marriage wasn't that long. It was until I was 24, but still, that was a long time, 15 to 24, to be in a relationship that wasn't working for me. But that was all I had to go on, was the shoulds and what my parents' expectations were. And of course, when you have a should like that, as we teach in nonviolent communication, is the should is one of the most violent words, right? When you have that should, you only have two choices. One is either to submit and the other is to rebel. And my nature just happens to be rebellion. Right. So I married, this rock and roll musician.
Yep.
And neither one serves us personally, right?
Well, and it doesn't serve them either. Like, that's the other side of the coin, right? Is like, how much damage did I do by staying? How much damage did I do to him, to his future, to myself, to my future, by not listening?
Right.
What my whole system was telling me was a bad move for both of us.
Yep. And I think, the self-trust, it developed over time. Like, I remember thinking I would have like an intuitive hit, like turn right here rather than left or something like that. And I remember I kind of noticed them. Yeah. Even though I was in this drinking and drugging phase, where I was just like, I'm shocked actually that I even could notice it even during that stage of my life. Last week I had 35 years clean and sober, which is a total miracle. But at the time, that's where I was, and I when I would listen to the intuition, things would flow. And when I wouldn't listen to the intuition, I would get into some big, huge traffic jam or an accident or something. And so I started learning to listen that way. And then I remember when I got into recovery, I remember living in San Francisco, and one of my friends there, Audra, I'll never forget her. She told me that she had a higher power that she called on, whose name was Sally Parker. And Sally Parker was really good at helping her find parking spaces. So that was my first attempt to like have this relationship with a power greater than myself, and with myself, really, to be able to trust in something that was guiding me.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
would pray, okay, I need a parking spot, Sally Parker, rather than driving around in circles in San Francisco looking for a parking spot. And Sally Parker would come through, you know? And then it got to the point where I was trusting something a little bigger than that. And then it was something bigger than that. And then, and then I found nonviolent communication. And then I started like listening to my own GPS inside. So I kind of had this tools of navigation, but then I learned how to do it within myself rather than with something outside of myself or a
Yeah.
power greater than
Yeah.
myself. And so really it has been quite a process, I would say. So I've been teaching NBC now for 15 years. So it probably was like maybe 20 years of a process,
Yeah.
to really get so solid that no, I know this. I can trust my body, definitely, without a doubt. And you didn't mention in my bio, but I've been a body worker, a hands-on healer for like
Yeah.
35 years now. So 34 years. But so that is another way that I had to go into my own self and like really learn to navigate my body from the inside out,
Yeah.
with somebody touching me on the outside and saying, what are you feeling here? And I have to
Yeah.
feel it from the inside.
Uh-huh.
And I taught other people how to do that under my own hands, for
Yeah.
years. Of course, during COVID, we're not
Yeah.
touching anybody right now,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but I love that. And I feel like that's a big piece of where I've learned how to just be present, right, with whatever is.
Yes. And that's what I was going to jump onto, is that, when we talk about these small steps that we take, that for some of us take 30 years, some of us take 5 years, some of us take 20 years. The difference, I think, is when those of us who have learned earlier on to trust our radar, to be present, to be mindful, to pay attention, can move through that so much quicker than those of us who had to do it the hard way, right? Like myself included, where it's, it can be easier. And at the same time, we cannot avoid the process. Nobody gets to jump over the chasm by magic. You have to do the journey. You just have to. Sorry, folks, if I'm bursting a bubble, but there is no magic cure. There is no perfect intervention or healing tool that wipes it all out. You still have to be a human on this planet, learning and growing and on a journey. The question is how you decide to live that journey. How much are you paying attention? How much are you willing to experience? How much support are you willing to receive? All of these different pieces that can make our journey maybe a little less traumatic, a little less intense or bumpy, if that's what we're here to do. Some of us, that was our journey. We needed to go through all of that in order to be the space holders that we are. I know if I hadn't experienced some of the things that I had experienced, I don't know that I could hold the kind of emotional space that I do for people.
I'm totally with you on that. And I was just going to say, I learned before, in my teenage years, I remember when I was 14, going home and putting my foot inside the kitchen door and knowing who was home, what kind of moods they were in,
Yep.
and whether or not, and I actually remember turning around and leaving again and just going someplace else and not going in because it wasn't where I wanted to be, right? It wasn't a safe place, and I would go someplace else. And so I had that sensitivity, that the skills, right, of hyper vigilance or whatever you want to call it, to be able to notice those things.
Yeah.
And I think that was one gift of having had a really challenging young years, right? Is that, I had those skills already. And I actually think in some ways it moved me through the process more
It's 4
quickly,
o'clock.
more readily,
Yes.
because I had that.
Yeah,
that
absolutely. I agree. I agree. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my goodness. So any take that moment and check back in. Any last nuggets that you have for us? Anything that you feel will kind of wrap up the gist of your message here today? Anything specific about like how you define power? What would you like to leave us with?
Yeah, well, what I want to talk about is like, um, throughout my life, different teachers or whatever have said to me at different points, I give you permission to whatever. And I think there was a good girl conditioning in me that needed permission from some authority figure
Yeah.
to speak my truth or be however I wanted to be, even though, and it was part of that in the beginning of like not knowing if what was inside was something that really wanted to be expressed or if I could express it or whatever. But I know for myself that a lot of my process has been getting permission from others,
Yeah.
and or giving my own self permission in more recent years, where if I feel that in that navigation inside of myself calling me a certain direction, like when I discovered Casey's program. I remember you and I spoke
Yeah.
about it, and I
Yeah.
had gone to her website when I heard her on a summit, the Women Gone Rogue summit. I heard her on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was my first encounter with her, and I went to her website and I looked up and as soon as I saw the WomenSpeak Circles, I had goosebumps all over me, and I really, really, it was like my body was telling me, this is for you. And here I am now completely on the other side of that, where I am a leader of those circles, and it was just because I followed that guy, that I let myself have those goosebumps and I followed what they were telling me. I call them truth bumps,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep.
They're navigating us. It's our body's wisdom telling us, and we do a lot of dancing too, in the beginning of the WomenSpeak Circles to really listen. And I'm shocked at how just dancing to a song or two, this my book and other things, creativity starts to just flow out of me. And it's because I'm so much more able to tap into the wisdom of my body.
Yeah.
And so what I want to leave with is just to give any women who are watching permission to really listen to their bodies and
Yeah.
to really follow what their body is telling them, and to not be afraid to follow the wisdom that is there, because I have to have the experience over and over and over again that wherever it leads me is just very satisfying, very
Yeah.
blissful, very whatever life purpose, mission driven, however you want to call it. But really to have the permission that we can honor what our bodies are telling us.
Absolutely. And like you've said, it's a muscle. And so we also get to give ourselves permission to be wobbly with it, and to have to kind of experiment a little bit with like, is that like, am I really feeling, and yeah, to give ourselves the room to be able to build that muscle, because it doesn't just pop out of nowhere. We have to play with it. We have to experiment. We have to try on different exercises, different activities to find that. And it's the safest place for us to be, is inside our own body.
That's right. Even though lots of things may have happened to us that told us otherwise,
Yeah.
it's not true.
Yeah.
This is the safest place to be. And finding the safety in our own bodies,
Yeah.
nobody can take that away from us. And what a
Yes.
gift. What a gift.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. What a beautiful note to end on. Thank you so much, Terri.
You're welcome, Michelle. Thank you.
Love it. Love our conversations.
Yes, indeed.